don't sweat the small things. The number one thing we should be doing is making learning super exciting and super fun, and just having kids really love school and love learning. You can never walk in someone else's shoes. And to some extent, kids are who they are. You can put a whole lot of effort into pushing a kid to do something before they're ready, and it's probably not worth it.
Hey guys, I'm Young, a full-time dad and a full-time professional with the goal to become the best parent possible. The Girl Dad Show is my journey interviewing fellow working parents aspiring to be both good at work and parenting. I'm going to do this by gathering and sharing unfiltered perspectives from my guests. So join me as I research parenthood one interview at a time. Welcome, Victoria, to the Girl Dad Show. Thank you for joining me today.
It's my pleasure. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. Let's jump right in. Can you tell the listeners what you do for a living?
Sure. So I have been an entrepreneur, founder pretty much my whole career, actually. I had one short stint in investment banking right out of college, and then I thought better of that and started my own company and have had a number of different ventures, some very, very successful, including an exit to Google, and others less successful. Today, I am the founder of an organization called Prisma that's actually born directly out of sort of our needs. I'm talking about me and my husband as parents. We really, as we started with 3 children and as we started to think about educating them, we really, went on a deep dive about what would be the best approach to education for our kids, given the kind of future they're going to live in and given our family needs. And that led us on a large investigation of education, which resulted in Prisma, which is for our kids, but for other kids too, because we thought, gosh, if we're going to put all this effort into creating our dream school, let's make it for other families and other kids who might have the same hopes and dreams and needs that we have. So Prisma is currently focused on 4th through 8th graders. It is a full educational program for kids who learn from home or anywhere in the world. But it is very, very different from your typical sort of online school, which I would say has largely taken traditional school and brought it online. There's still lectures, there's still sort of textbooks. They may be electronic, but they look like textbooks. Mm-hmm. There's still grades. No, Prisma is very sort of alternative and progressive in that respect. We have project-based learning. Kids move at their own pace. Live workshops are very much collaborative and kids working together. They are not lectures. We do not have grades. We have iterative feedback. So we're not typical online school. We're definitely not typical homeschooling because we very much focus on the community and the social experience. We bring together kids that learn together every single day, collaborate together, hang out together, do clubs together. We also provide a coach that is there to guide each kid. Our coaches work with a small number of kids and they really get to know their mentee learners very closely, what they're capable of, what drives them, what they're interested in. So that's different from the typical homeschool experience. And obviously it's different from the typical bricks and mortar experience because it's very flexible, schedules are flexible, location is flexible. So we think we've created a new approach to education, and that is what I'm focused on today, which between that and being a mom of 3 young kids is making life very full and exciting. It's not boring.
I love it. Yes, that's amazing. I love your entrepreneurial journey and how you've merged that with parenthood. It's almost like the kids prompted you to kind of take your entrepreneurial drive and tick and actually create a company that actually incorporates them into your work life.
They did, perhaps against my better judgment, because this is my first time being an entrepreneur with kids. And I must say, I had a break in between being acquired, selling a company to Google, spent some years at Google. And then my husband and I said, we've earned a break. Let's take a break. And then we told ourselves, whatever we do next, it needs to be something that could have a large positive impact on the world. And during that time, I saw a lot of amazing mums and dads running startups and being parents. And I thought, oh my God, that looks impossible. I don't know how anyone could ever do that. And then what do you know? I dived in and did it myself. So now I know.
Can you tell us about your kids?
Sure. So I have a 7-year-old daughter, Elle, just turned 7, 4-year-old, almost 5-year-old son, Nicholas, and a 2-year-old, almost 3-year-old daughter called Amelie. And they're the best. Every parent's kids are the best. And mine are the best for me. So
that's amazing. And then what made you go with 3?
Oh, great question. If I'd started having kids younger, I might have more than 3. I love it.
Like having kids. I love it.
Parenting. I love the baby stage. I love the little kid stage. I love the 7-year-old stage, and I don't know what it's like beyond that yet. But we chose to have kids fairly late in life, past mid-30s. And so at a certain point, you couldn't keep having them. So that's part of the reason. My husband and I often talk 3 at this stage feels like the perfect number. There's always, when one kid feels like doing their own thing, there's always 2 other kids that can play together. And we're kind of lucky having a son in the middle, I think, because he's special in his very own way. Every kid is special in their own way, but he's unique for being the only boy. And then we have the oldest who's unique for being the oldest, and the youngest who's unique for being the youngest. So for now, at least, 3 is feeling like the perfect number. But I imagine however many kids you have feels like the perfect number in the end.
That's right. Although I have heard common themes and almost like generic commentary from parents that have 3 that it's not as the same as getting 1 to 2. Yeah. 1 to 2 is hard. 2 to 3 is really hard, and then 3 to 4 it gets super easy. I mean, I still remember and this was before we had 3, so I didn't listen to the article, but I remember reading a New York Times article that said 3 is the hardest number of kids to have. 4 is easier, and it's because you always have this dynamic of one kid getting left out. But versus if you've got 4 kids, you can have 2 kids playing, 2 kids playing, and have 4 kids playing. For us, at least, we haven't experienced that much. It's kind of worked really nicely so far where when our oldest wants to do her own thing, because she's starting to reach that point where she might more often want to do her own thing, then the 2 little ones play together. And so far it's working out okay. But I can see why that dynamic could be tricky. Oh, sorry, Victoria. In true Girl Dad podcast fashion, my kid just barged into my office and lowered my desk. So this is Grace. I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old daughter. Yeah, I have 2 girls, hence the Girl Dad show. Yeah. Got it. I could have guessed that part. Yeah. So you're almost the same as us. You just don't have the 7-year-old. That's right. And I think that it's also really funny what you said earlier, because I feel the same way too. Is like, I love the whole aspect of parenting, and it's so fun, and it's just so much more involving than I thought that it would. Imagined. Yeah. I could not imagine that I would love anything this much. Yeah. You know what I mean? Let alone 2 things this much. I just didn't know I even had that inside of me. Right. Isn't that amazing? And it's just, it's an amazing experience. And I definitely want more. But similar to you, we started pretty late, like in our mid-30s as well. And so the age thing became a kind of a ongoing barrier, even, at the we're at the cusp of should we still do it? And then we just decided not to. But I would love to have more. I probably, same exact sentiment as you. If I had the opportunity, I'd probably have 7 or 8. Right. Gosh, I just want all these kids wrestling all over me. It'd be amazing. Yeah. So I do want to unpack what you said earlier, though. So you said that you saw these other parents starting to do the entrepreneur route with kids. And I have to say that I've also noticed a large surge of people doing that. And it's pretty fascinating, right? It's almost like this new generation of parents are not typical, right? And what societally is normal. And they're kind of pioneering this element of incorporating work with their parenting. Have you noticed that? That's a really good question. I mean, I feel like I became more aware of entrepreneurs who are parents once I became a parent. But it wouldn't surprise me if that is becoming more common, because I just think sort of entrepreneurial careers are becoming more common, both in the traditional sense of
I've started a business. I run my own business. But even I just feel like it used to be that careers were largely sort of, you took a job with a company and you stayed with that company your whole life. And then it was, maybe you didn't stay with the company your whole life, but you stayed in the same career. Now I think we're shifting into a world where people change careers frequently. They piece together careers for themselves or work for themselves, and they might be having 3 different ways of making a living, which makes more and more people sort of fall into that bucket of being entrepreneurial and piecing together their careers and their lives. And I do think COVID has accelerated this idea of how do you kind of fluidly merge parenting and work, rather than sort of you go out the door at 7:30 a.m. and you're back at 6 p.m. and that's your work time and there's no kids. And then before that it's kids, and after that it's kids. For me at least, and I think this is a somewhat common experience during COVID, it's fluid. Like I might, need to start work at 8:30 on one day and 9 on another day and 7 on another day. But then I've got a break in the middle of the day. So I go and have lunch with the kids, and this day I finish earlier. Some other day I need to work a bit later, and then the kids are in bed. I jump back on and I work again. For me at least, and I think COVID, having parents working from home, has made this more common. It's become this sort of fluid merging of work and home and parenting, which I personally like a lot. I couldn't do it if I couldn't have that. But it does make it complex sometimes.
It's exactly what it is, though. But I think that's becoming much more commonplace, and I think COVID does have a huge factor and impact on it. But I do think that I think it's the right thing.
Yeah, for me, and I Prisma plays into this, right? Prisma is a model where you can still have your kids at home or anywhere, but they have a full education they're taken care of. The parent can still work. The parent doesn't have to be the teacher. And part of our thesis was there'll be more and more parents that say, you know what, I really like this flexibility, this dynamic of spending more time with my kids, with my family, of sort of merging work, family, school all together. And so, we have lots of families involved with Prisma who are just like that. But yeah, it would be the only way that I could do what I'm doing. The downside, I would say, is, for me, at least, the age of my kids, I find myself, because I have an office in the garage, I find myself sneaking into the house when I need to grab something or go to the restroom, because, the kids will find me. And then before I know it, instead of 5 minutes of sneaking into the house, it's turned into 35 minutes.
It's like a 20-minute game of games and tickling and totally.
Exactly. Versus I think the kids that are used to their parent leaving at 8 and used to their parent coming home at 6 are just kind of used to that, and they don't question it.
That's right.
For my kids, it's a little more like, do you have to go now? Are you leaving early today? So there's a bit more negotiation going on, I think. But nevertheless, I wouldn't trade that.
Have you changed how you think about work success now that you have kids, and now you're also working on an education based company? But have you changed your qualifications for what success is in business?
Yeah, well, I think it changed already in that my metric for success is now firmly impact, not financial metrics. Although part of having an impact, I believe, is creating a business model that's sustainable, so that, we have a really viable way to grow and reach large numbers of kids. But yeah, I think, as open-minded as I felt that I was back when I was running other companies, and as friendly as I thought we were to parents, I still had probably this little idea of success equates to how many hours you're putting in to your venture. And I can't do that anymore. I need to carve out lots of hours for my kids too. And it's not even because they need it. It's because I need it. My kids are absolutely fine. We're super, super lucky that we can afford to have a nanny, and she's amazing.
Right.
And we have great preschool options. So my kids are fine, but I recognize that they're growing up quickly, and I will deeply regret it if I don't spend as much time with them as I can. So when I suffer with this sort of work kids balance, it's much more about me and the amount of time I want to spend with them than it is me thinking that they're missing out in some way. And so I think I've just had to shift my expectations of myself, where there's only so much I can achieve today with work. What are the things I really, really have to get done today? And the rest, gosh, I wanted to do it today, but it's now late and I do need my sleep. And so I'll just get it done tomorrow. And so that's been a bit of a shift, I think.
Totally. And then how about Prisma? So like as a company that focuses on kind of innovating the education space, like how do you qualify that success now that you're a parent, you're also a former entrepreneur, and now you're building a business that actually is like disrupting, a very, very societally normalized space?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have a few different metrics for success. At this stage, we're much more focused on kind of refining our model, getting it to be as the best educational experience that we can. We are less focused right now on reaching large numbers of kids. I think we've got to put building blocks in place before we can do that. We've got to sort of walk before we can run. So success metrics at this stage start first and foremost with kids loving Prisma. We have a super strong belief that, the number one thing we should be doing is making learning super exciting and super fun, and just having kids really love school and love learning, because our belief is if we can do that, then they will be successful and they will really try their hardest. Right. And so, we survey kids regularly. And one of the things we ask is, are you happier at Prisma than your previous public school or private school or homeschool, whatever you were doing before? And at this stage, it's 100% of kids that are saying, yes, I'm happier at Prisma than I was before. So that is something that we're monitoring really closely and we feel really good about. And then, the right up there as well as parents being happy. So we survey parents regularly, and one of the best ways to measure if parents are happy with your product or your service is if they're willing to recommend it to a friend. And it's something called a net promoter score. I mean, we have 100% of parents that are sort of highly willing to recommend Prisma to a friend. It equates to a net promoter score of, I think we're at 74, which is really high. So that,
Very
and
high.
then we are looking at other things, like we are looking at academic growth. We use a sort of national assessment there's no time limit. It's sort of skills-based, not knowledge retention based. And we're seeing really fantastic growth with our kids in math and reading, like well over 150% of sort of nationally expected growth. So that's really great. And then we also we have what we call our sort of Prisma outcomes or Prisma skills that we really want kids to really become amazing at Prisma, because we think that's what they'll need to thrive in the kind of world that our kids will live in. And so things like being great problem solvers, being great communicators and collaborators, being having a design thinking mindset. So the idea of being able to sort of prototype and iterate and take feedback and understand the needs of others, having great follow through. We look at these things, and these are really hard to measure. So I think I'll be honest and say, I don't think we've figured out exactly the best way to measure these different skills, but by both looking at where kids are at when they come in based on parents' perception, kids' perception, coaches' perception, and how they grow over time at Prisma, again, by asking parents, by asking coaches. We'll sometimes have kids work on projects, and we'll really look at how has this kid changed in terms of their problem solving, their creative thinking. We're doing our best to measure those, and certainly parents across the board are saying they're seeing kids growing in all of those areas.
And you said specifically 4th to 8th grade, right? Is where you're initially focusing on. That's a very specific grade group. Why did you choose that? Yeah.
You know what? There's a very specific reason. We actually started Prisma initially thinking maybe we'd start with high school, because high schoolers are more independent, and perhaps that's a good place to start, and then we'd move down. But the more we spoke to teachers as we were hiring for our coaching role, in speaking with educators, both those that were currently in the classroom and those that had moved on to do other things, we kept hearing the same thing, which is that fourth grade, roughly fourth grade, maybe for some it's fifth grade, maybe for some it's sixth, there's this real shift in kids from moving from loving school and being really excited about school and wanting to go to school to not loving school and really getting that, that awful feeling in their stomach when they have to go to school every day. And also a shift in terms of kids sort of coming into their education feeling like, I can do this, I'm capable, I'm good at math, I'm good at reading, to starting to hear things like, I'm not good at school, I'm not good at math, I'm not good at reading, I'm not good at writing. And I think there's a number of reasons why that shift might happen. One of them is that testing starts to ramp up. Standardized testing ramps up around that age. And so we felt like, gosh, if we can reach kids at that age, maybe we can catch them before they start to form these sort of fixed mindsets about what they're capable of, and before they start to get this sort of negative connotation about school and learning. But we didn't go younger. We could have thought, well, let's catch them even younger than fourth grade. We haven't gone younger than fourth grade yet, because we do think there's a limit to how young you can go and have a largely virtual model of education really work well. I think, there is a certain amount of, and we build this into our model because we believe it's really good, of giving kids choice and giving them ownership over their learning and ownership over their schedules that may be tough to expect a 5-year-old to do. We have had some third graders in our program who I would say academically looked more like fourth graders or above, and they've done just fine. But for now, we haven't gone right down to sort of kindergarten age, because we felt like we need to really nail it for this age group before we think about going much younger. And we're more likely to go older, sort of up into high school, I think, before we go younger.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And then I have to ask, is your first daughter old enough to be in this programming, and are you going to send her in, or?
We will. She's not old enough yet. Yeah, because she's first grade, so she's got at least a couple more years to go. So we are homeschooling her. We are basically providing as close to what Prisma provides without her being a part of Prisma yet, although our kids are as involved in Prisma as we can get them. My daughter Al often comes to Expo Day, because at Prisma we operate in 5-week cycles, and there's these really cool themes that overarch each cycle, like cities of the future, or inventor studio, or this build a business, or some of our themes. And at the end of the theme or the cycle, there's Expo Day, where all the kids present what they've been working on to the whole Prisma community, parents, grandparents. And so my daughter always joins Expo Day, and she gets to see what the kids are doing. Or we have family social nights that my kids love to show up to. But no, we are homeschooling Al, but we've put together a group of other homeschoolers that 3 days a week she learns with and also plays with, and that's sort of her community. It's the equivalent of the Prisma community for her.
That's awesome. So you guys are actually doing homeschooling, but you're also doing that even with the twist, because you're grouping people together.
Yeah.
So they're getting some of the social interactions as well as the classroom kind of like feel of camaraderie.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Exactly. Yeah, and that was sort of a really big impetus behind Prisma, that as we went on this deep dive into like, how do we want to educate our kids, we eventually looked at homeschooling, which I think we went into it with a lot of the preconceptions or misconceptions that a lot of people have, which is like, whoa, homeschooling, that's weird. That must be weird, people, right? Like, totally asocial kids. And discovered that's totally not true. And there's many just beautiful things about homeschooling in terms of the ability to tailor an education to a kid's interests and their speed of learning and their ability level, and to really tailor a kid's education to the needs of the family. But two things held us back from diving headlong into homeschooling. One was we didn't feel like we had the bandwidth or perhaps the inclination to be the main teacher for our kids. And the other was as much as I think homeschool kids are well socialized, it takes a lot of effort to do that, of sort of, participating in park days and signing your kids up for different activities with other homeschoolers. And we just like the idea of our kids having this core group of other kids that they didn't only play with, but they learned with together and collaborated with on projects on a very regular basis. And you can put that together as a homeschool family. There's homeschool co-ops that do that. But it's a lot of effort, and I think there's a lot of sort of turnover, and homeschool co-op works for a while and then it doesn't. And so we like the idea of, can we give all the best parts of homeschooling, the flexibility and the tailoring to the kids' interests and the tying learning to the real world, whilst providing the teaching part, so the parent doesn't have to be the teacher, and providing this rich community that learns together and sort of, socializes together. And that's where Prisma came from.
Yeah, I love it. And I love that you called out the stigma around it too, because that's kind of like very, very like an unspoken commonality that people think about when you say homeschooling. And I love that you're sharing kind of your homeschooling experience, because I think it's really powerful for more parents to hear that, and parents to understand that the optionalities that are coming out. And there's a very famous person that's starting their own school too. I think Elon Musk is also starting the process of building his own school. Have you heard of that?
Yeah. He's had a school for his kids for a while, I think.
That's right.
Actually.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. But I think that it's becoming like more, you can feel the momentum coming with like the concern around our education system, even like as far back as like 15 years ago with like, even Khan Academy, right? Like this whole ideology of like giving people access to the answers to the questions that they want to learn about, and then like this whole idea of like adapting to the customization of the learner's mindset, their pace, their velocity, and all those things, and how the current school education structure is set up to basically generate workers, for lack of better words, right?
And the world has changed.
A lot has changed since that was a necessity in the world, right? And
right.
I don't think that we've adapted that. And so it's really fascinating that you're a parent, and then the business that you decided to tackle was one that had to do with this. And I think that that's very, very cool. So I kind of want to switch gears and ask, what was your childhood like?
Oh,
how did you grow up?
Yeah, a beautiful childhood. I grew up in New Zealand. That's why I have an accent still, or a bit of an accent. I grew up in a rural community in New Zealand. So, when I was a kid, my dad worked on a farm, and then over time, my mum and dad bought some land and created their own asparagus farm. So awesome. I grew up in a very rural area. The school I went to until high school was like an actual one-room schoolhouse. Actually, it had 2 rooms. Wow. It ranged from 20 kids in the whole entire school to maybe the biggest it got was 35 kids in the whole entire school.
Wow.
And so academically, was it anything like the kind of prestigious schools that are in the neighborhood where I currently live, which is Silicon Valley, which has arguably some of the best schools in the world?
Yeah.
No, I'm sure it wasn't nearly as academically rigorous, but did it give me like a wonderful foundation of confidence and community and just sort of loving school. And it really did. It was such a great place for me to just build a whole lot of confidence and feeling like a lot of security. And I didn't have the sort of social challenges that I think, tweens have today of nobody.
Especially in Silicon Valley, right? I mean,
there's a lot of pressure. And I didn't talk about that yet, but that is one of the biggest reasons we really started to deep dive into our kids' education is there's a lot of stories of anxiety and stress and in the community in which we live in. And that we didn't want that for our kids. Like childhood is so short and it's such a beautiful time in kids' lives that we didn't want that to be marred by sort of stress and anxiety. And I don't think that's happening so much at the elementary level where we live, but as kids get older, it's a real issue.
Yeah, it is definitely something that's increasing in its pressure. I feel like I just moved out of the Bay Area into Austin, Texas last year. And as I was looking at different schools and things, and I'd say the vast majority of the kids going even into preschool were, like way more advanced than my girls. They had already, at like 3 years old, were already going to mathnasium and Kumon.
Right.
And I'm like, wait, what?
And how
I'm
do
like,
you
oh my
avoid
gosh.
it? Like, I've worked so hard to avoid that and to avoid overscheduling. But at a certain point, it's tough when that's what everybody. And so, by doing the homeschooling thing, we've just kind of opted out of it. We don't hear about it. It's like see no evil, hear no evil. But yeah, and I've often thought about, because my schooling was sort of like big fish in a little pond sort of thing. We're like, because the high school I went to was pretty average, but I did really well. I was like, topped most of my classes. So I graduated high school feeling like I can do anything. On
top of the world. Yeah.
And then it was a little bit of a reality check when I ended up going to university in the US, but I'd formed enough confidence in myself by then that I could weather it. I could weather the fact like, maybe I'm kind of mediocre at this. That's okay. I didn't lose I found my confidence and sort of had that base. And so I've often thought, are you better to be like, a big fish in a little pond or a little fish in a big pond? And I guess the big pond in this case would be fantastic, top-rated, amazing schools where everybody's brilliant and it's pretty hard to shine. So, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but I know what I had and it worked. So
there you go. Yeah. And that kind of leads me to my next question, which is like, a part of this is really like, how do you qualify success as a parent?
Yeah. That is such a hard question, because I feel like one thing I've really learned since becoming a parent is I've learned not to judge other parents, also not to judge myself too harshly, because I just think you can never walk in someone else's shoes. And to some extent, kids are who they are. Like, I think you can mess it up. Like, if you're not loving, if you don't provide a secure environment, if you don't support kids sort of unconditionally, you can take a kid that could have been great in life and really mess them up. But beyond that, I think there's only so much you can do to influence the way your kid turns out, because to some extent, they're going to be who they're going to be. Like, there's parameters, of course, and I really do think you can mess it up. But, one example, I have one kid that's an average eater, one kid that's a fantastic eater, eats anything, and one kid that is the pickiest eater you could ever imagine, like, certifiably picky. And I didn't do anything different. And so that gives me a little bit of relief. I'm like, well, I did my best, or we did our best. And I think they were just born like that. Like, the picky one never really liked food, even when he was a baby. When we went on to solids, he couldn't have cared less. The great eater loved solids right from the minute she encountered them. And so I guess success, what you usually judge success as a parent is if you've raised a happy, well-rounded, well-adjusted kid. And I think ultimately, that is where you'll feel successful as a parent, where your kid is well-adjusted, generally happy, and finds a way to thrive in their adult lives. But I also recognize that some parents can do everything right and do their very best, and they still have a kid that is struggling in some part of their lives. And I'm not sure that's always the parent's fault. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it isn't.
It's a great answer. I love that. I love that. That's a really, really sage response. And I think it's something that we need to tell ourselves as parents very, very often, because, the reality is that you can nurture up to a certain degree, but there's a certain point that's nature. And then there's also a certain point that's also mixed in, which is just that they're a human being and they're going to figure things out in the way they want to. Right. And so I loved your answer there. Victoria, I'm going to move right into my rapid fire questions next, just because I want to make sure that we get the same 4 questions asked to every single guest. So there's some symmetry to my podcast.
Okay.
You ready for them?
Sure. Yeah.
All right. So what advice do you have for other parents and soon-to-be parents?
I would have given the advice I just gave, which is like, there's only so much you can do. You can't break your child that easily. I think the other piece of advice that I've learned over time, on the first kid, I made this mistake. On the second two, I think I've got better at it, which is don't push your kid to do anything, basically. Like, they will reach developmental milestones when they reach their developmental milestones. And I think you can try to get your kid to be able to recognize all the letters of the alphabet at age 2. And if you work at that, you'll probably do it. But you could just wait till they're 4 or 5 and it'll just kind of happen on its own. And there'll be no pushing and struggling, or, similarly like riding a bike. You can push a kid to ride a bike without training wheels when they're 4, or you could just wait till they're 5 or 6 and it'll probably just come. Swimming, like, there's just, I think kids are ready to do things when they're ready to do things. And of course you create the environment where they can experiment and try and have opportunities to learn. But I just think, like, you can put a whole lot of effort into pushing a kid to do something before they're ready, and it's probably not worth it. Just wait till they're ready.
Yeah. Enjoy the moment.
Yeah. Our first kid could recognize all the letters of the alphabet at 2. The other 2 kids, we've spent 0 time on that, and they've figured it out over time. The little one, not yet, but the 4-year-old has. So
that's really good. Really good. I feel like you're talking directly to me right now, so I really appreciate that answer a lot. Okay, so if you can go back and tell yourself one thing before having kids, what would you tell yourself?
First of all, like, you're going to love this. I still remember the night before my first child was born, thinking, like, it was a scheduled C-section, so I knew when it was going to happen.
Nice,
nice. Stay in there. I want you. I do want you, but, like, I don't want you tomorrow. Like, this is going to, like, totally change my life, and it was the best thing ever. But this is very cliche, but it's just so true. Like, it goes really fast. Enjoy every minute, like, maximize every opportunity because it goes so fast. And then the other thing that I just said of, like, don't sweat the small things, because they'll turn out, like, the little things will not mess up your child. It's the big things. It's the love and the security and the room to experiment and take risks and all of that really matters, not the day-to-day little things that you do. And I've really learned that, I think, as it relates to eating, because I have a kid that doesn't eat well, and that's caused a lot of anxiety, of sort of like, don't count day-to-day what nutrients they're having. Like, just think big picture, try to provide a reasonably somewhat balanced diet, and big picture, it's going to probably work out okay.
Yeah, that's great. So what is the most surprising thing that you have learned about yourself after becoming a parent?
I have infinite patience. It takes a lot. It takes a lot to get me to lose my cool. But sort of related to this, sometimes I'm a pushover. So, if I had to critique my parenting, I could do lots of critiquing. One of them is sometimes I should stand my ground more than I do. My husband would tell me that. So.
Okay, so to close us out, what's your all-time favorite business book?
Oh, funny you should ask, because I was just talking about this yesterday. There's a book called Good to Great, which actually lots of people know, so this is probably not going to surprise anyone. But I love that book just because it's one that I feel like I read years and years and years ago, and I read it again, and I've actually been influenced by it, and it actually changed my thinking, versus other books where you read them, they're kind of interesting, but I'm not sure it changed anything. So
yeah, that's a great book. I love that book. It's a really
good book. Yeah,
it is.
So many good lessons.
Very good. Awesome. And then if people wanted to learn more about Prisma because you continue to develop this out and build it, would it just go to your website, or would that be the best way?
Yeah, there's tons of information there. It's not prisma.com, it's joinprisma.com. There's a lot of information. You can also sign up for a small group info session if you really want to learn a lot about Prisma. So yeah, that's the best place.
Awesome. And then I'll link it in your description as well, on your episode as well, so people can click to it.
Great.
But thank you so much for joining me on my podcast. I had a lovely time meeting you.
Yeah, me too. And your daughter. I'm glad I met your daughter.
Thank you for letting her join our podcast episode.
Of course. Thank you.
Talk soon, okay?
Bye. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Girl Dad Show. We really hope you enjoyed that interview, and as always, please take a moment to review, rate, and subscribe. We'll see you next time.